Clifton, how are we
What's
doing
up,
today?
man?
All's good?
Sounds good. Yeah, everything is all right, man. It's a little chilly here, but how's it up
Yeah.
north?
Yeah, it's cold. It's like in the teens. It's in the teens here in Minneapolis. Well, welcome to the Intrinsic podcast. I'm so excited to have you on and share your story and share your not only professional baseball background, but also how'd you get there? Where do you come from? What was your, like we all face obstacles in life, right? And that reminds me of like what I had to learn going through my addiction and recovery was um, in the line of like Marcus Aurelius, is like the obstacle is the way. I had to face my challenges and find a way with help to overcome them. And now that we're on the other side of that for myself, and you've had, you're going to share your story here. The Intrinsic podcast is such that we help inspire others through lived experiences, So
Sure.
with that being said, what's your story? Like where do you come from? How'd you get into pro ball? And what are some earlier years that some struggles and successes too, that you had to go through to lead you into adulthood, manhood, let's just say.
Okay.
And go ahead with an introduction on.
I will. I come from Kansas City, Missouri. Graduated back in the '90s. Went the JUCO route. Had the opportunity to play in the JUCO World Series back in '98. Several pro guys off that team, either from getting drafted out of JUCO or even for that matter the next level. I think the coaching staff there, they had an opportunity to, coach one of the best as far as Albert goes, but also they were more interested in taking guys that didn't hail the blue chip athlete, like the high school guy that's going to go to the SEC right out, and is handle with the NIL, how much money is he going to make? Whereas these guys that all played that on this JUCO route, they're that blue collar, not a lot of opportunities, not a wealthy environment, so to speak. So, but we had a lot of success just from that dirtbag mentality of how to approach the game. But then played Division I down Northwestern State in Louisiana and drafted by LA in 2000. Had my cup of tea, so to speak, as far as just living the dream, and things just hurt more just because I was a fifth-year senior. I was older. Things I had done to my body in order to compete at that level were starting to pay its toll, which ultimately led to a lot of other things going down the road after pro ball. But it opened up doors to coach up, from high school up to, the college level, as well as given me the opportunity to be an official and an umpire from, the high school, college level up to, even doing some of the independent pro stuff. But baseball has been that life. And I can tell you right after pro ball, it was so much, what do I do now? Baseball was anything and everything. I wanted to give back to the game that gave so much to me. But also, I enjoyed the instruction part of it simply because every kid has that light bulb moment. We've all at some point had a coach that just took a little extra time, or, he saw the diamond where others saw the opportunity or their own potential, It also opened up some avenues for some good stories, some that we can't discuss here, obviously, which I know that we've all been there. But also, more importantly, it's opened me up to a lot of other avenues that's taken a path that now in hindsight, being an adult, being a father, being a husband, at least a decent one, but not a great one, which obviously led to first divorce, or even for that matter, even being a halfway decent boyfriend. Not necessarily recovering or reeling from it, but because it was a remarkable relationship, amazing woman. It was getting into the doctor to accept the fact that this is the toll that you've had to pay to learn a few things that now life's decisions are coming back. And now you either A, deal with the consequences, or B, more importantly, take the news, battle what you need to, but then make sure you help others not have to go down the same path, or even for that matter, learn from your successes or your failures. You know what I mean? Whether that's your own flesh and blood or somebody else. Because when you get down towards the basement, you realize that you're really not there yet, and the distance fallen. And especially for those of us that, have reached a certain level, whether in professional athletics or just any field of endeavor, you learn that fall, albeit embarrassing, or even for that matter, prideful of shouldering it. You don't have to. There's several people out there that love and care about you, but more importantly, that actually show it, reflect it, that already knew. So there's a nutshell from baseball all the way into dealing with the battles of here in KC.
Okay, so were you? I was defined by the game.
Absolutely,
were you
how
defined by the game?
Yeah, a lot of people even describe me as that. That what's the first thing that you think of? Well, it's regardless of what role I had. I mean, I've had every role on the field, and yeah, I mean, that was part of the struggle when I got the diagnosis this past summer, that for 41 straight years, 41 straight seasons, I've held some role in this wonderful game,
Can you share what the diagnosis was?
For a while, I've learned that my fuse was a little short, and that the anger was kind of the fluctuation. Things that should be petty and you just let it roll off, that in hindsight, that, but you learn that you're starting to recognize the impact it's having on others that you've surrounded yourself, people that you love and care about. And the memory started going. And so we all kind of knew that it had to do with concussions, whether foul balls I've taken or whatnot. And I finally got into the neurologist to learn, while CTE can't be diagnosed until after the fact, that, every symptom that I have, it's how bad is it? But also, more importantly, the other symptoms that I've encountered, that others in my life have encountered, has led to a Parkinson's diagnosis. Now, while I wouldn't say that I'm off the rail here with the shaking and all, there's I'm still learning how to deal with the episodes, so to speak. Some of it worse than others, and medicine has helped maintain that. The things that I've done has probably expedited that. I mean, maybe if I got into the doc a little sooner, it probably would have been a lot better, especially for me, or those that loved and cared about me. But ultimately, it was getting that and having an oh shit, and there's no other way to say it.
Yeah, when with CET, from what I understand, we've spoken offline here before we started recording, because the awareness of that is rather new in a way, right? To at least at a societal level. And then when we think about it, we think about football.
Of course, that or boxing, yeah.
Or boxing, right? Yeah, boxing. Yeah. So can you, for those who don't understand or even know what that is, so you and your doctors have come to the conclusion that may be from concussions. So you were
the Parkinson's, no. I mean, how it got there, or whether I did something to make it appear. I mean, I don't know how it all came about. The doc had me do some things, and I had to regurgitate and talk about a few things as far as symptoms and all. And then that's kind of the direction we went. The scan is where we learned that significant evidence of being concussed or lack of healing from being concussed was there. And it was kind of the language that, that I can regurgitate or remember, is that it didn't cause it, but it certainly didn't help matters. You know what I mean? Because let's face it, a lot of us have taken some foul balls or hit by pitch and, hitters, or played football when we were younger. I mean, who knows what hit, or if not we heal from it, whereas we've all had that. Well, I'm fine, I'm getting back in there, because it's the competitive nature of the mindset that, the elite soldiers, there's a reason they're elite. It's between their ears. The elite athletes, there's a reason for it. It's between their ears. It was that realization that if I'm already dealing with A, I had no idea that I was actually dealing with A and B, when really we could have just been dealing with A and maintaining B at such a low level that maybe it'd been a little bit easier to deal with. And a lot of the attributes that come along with the circumstances, though, it wouldn't have been as bad. It wouldn't have been as worse. I mean, but that's hindsight. We all know it's 2020.
Right. Yeah. I mean, when you talk about people like us, and we're athletes, but this is any type of performer, right? Like entrepreneur, CEO of some business. we start at a certain spot, we set a vision for ourselves and we attack that. So we need something to run from, something to run to. We don't know where the brake pad is.
Right.
It's a sleep when you're dead mentality. If you cry, you're weak type of mentality. And then especially for us, I mean, I'm 44, turning 45. You have a couple years on me, but not many. I'm happy to see that the whole mental side of the game is starting to surface as well. So you're seeing these mental performance coaches that are on the field with the athletes and everything else, because we're human too, you know?
That's one thing that I like about that movie For Love of the Game. You know, that they see, it's a rom-com, or, I mean, it's all romance and all. But if you play that game, one of the reasons it's my favorite is that someone broke up with us before we went out on the diamond, or you just got word that your dad went in the hospital and you've got to catch a flight right after today, or, it's this flipping on and off of the switch. And the thing about it is that whenever you leave the game, or you deal with, the vices that we all have, or even for that matter, just the personal side of quote unquote life, you like to think you might be able to approach it a certain way, but you never, at least I didn't, think of the impact to those that matter to you. It didn't ever cross my mind to believe that they could help, or much less need to know that side of it. You battle through it. It is what it is.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned For the Love of the Game, because I was 20 years old roughly when that came out, and I was in high A. And that moment where everything is going on in his life, right? He doesn't have the catcher he wants.
Right.
The team, he's with Detroit.
Yeah.
So they're playing the Yankees, right? And you're in his head throughout the entire game, right? And his was it his wife or his girlfriend?
His girlfriend.
Girlfriend. He was a drinker. He's chasing the skirt, but when he's on the mound, he's on his own desert, right? And that's Old Testament right there. The Israelites can throw. Yeah, but what does he do? He clears the mechanism.
Right.
And I was a starting pitcher, and I would always think about that. I'd watch that movie the night before my game, and that clearing the mechanism. Oh, man.
I would say something along those lines, or it's time to go to work. I mean, we all have those nerves, whether it's talking to a girl, or, oh, my God, we're about to lose one, or it's time to go to battle, whether it's not comparing it to war by any means, because I'm certainly never going to attest to that. Those guys are on a whole new level. But at some point, you have to have that deep breath, and you're like, it's time to go to work. All this doesn't matter.
Right.
I have a job to do. And in our world, it was the most individualized, performance-based arena, where you can have such a terrible day, but yet if you win, that's ultimately what it was all about. Did we win? Did we get closer to a ring? It doesn't matter if you went 4 for 4 or if I threw a one hitter. Well, if that one hitter was a bomb and we lost 1-0, I didn't do my job. Even though we can point at the offense, it doesn't make any difference. But that was that mindset, and that factor that in with everything else that enters into the equation. That's why I love For Love of the Game. I mean, we can laugh at New Kid in the Bull or Sheen, coming out as Wild Thing. I mean, we all have our favorite baseball movies, but there's also those of us who've been in that arena. You don't, unless you experience it. I mean, I had a chance to stand out there on the mound and look up, just like all of us did. There's a reason Yankee Stadium's Yankee Stadium.
Yeah.
I wish I could have done that. I'll be honest.
Yeah, that would have been something sweet, right? Yeah. So you had your pro career. How did you transition out? So you're defined by the game. We're in our 20s. We have a lot of life to live still. Mm-hmm. How'd you transition from, this is before your diagnosis. So, share a little bit about that transition for you. Cause you're, like I mentioned, you're defined by the game. What was next for you post baseball?
I did coaching. And then obviously once you realize that, my God, you make peanuts, not cashews. Then it was that, let's go into corporate America. I enjoy a certain level of inside work, but I also enjoy a certain level of outside work. I mean, a cubicle or an office is just, I don't know, it's just not for me. I got that balance. Met my soon-to-be wife at the time, and then obviously that led to we need to increase the flow. And there was always that. Was I keeping some baseball around and trying to supplement it, or was baseball supplementing the everyday life? And that's what me and the old lady at the time, we kind of went back and forth during those. When I was in my 20s, she was a little older than me. We'll leave it at that. But I did the coaching. And then whenever it became clear that when I was in education and I was coaching there at the high school level, it became clear that it was time for me to make an adjustment. And I wanted to stay in the game. So that's how I got into umpiring. I've had every other role on the field. Let's try this. And, or fortunately, I didn't have to start at the 12-year-old level, for example. I demonstrated a knowledge that even if I didn't know umpiring to what I would say is the rotations and how, like, the rules knowledge and all the unwritten rules of umpiring, on top of the unwritten rules of baseball, man, it was just so intriguing to me. And there's actually 3 teams on the field, and that was my way of making sure baseball didn't go away. It was that what defined me. And that's part of the reason why I'm struggling with where we're at now is like, what defines who I am. That's kind of what I lost sight of. Because if baseball is going away, now what? Well, then you put that effort into maybe somebody else, maybe a mate, maybe your own kid, and then factor in all those extra pressures that leads to vices, or for that matter, in to see the doc for what's going on between your ears.
And how are you coping with that now? Like, how's your life changed on the day to day? And did you have a moment where, I'm sure you had some sort of aha moment where you're like, okay, now my life is definitively changed again,
right?
Because this is rather recent, right?
The news came in the summertime, and then ultimately it was adapting, and then you get medications involved, to kind of, 1, understand the severity of where you're at, 2, how it's going to relate to the rest of your life, and then 3, ultimately figuring out that balance. And then once that balance is made, I hate to say it, man, you go back and you try to figure out what damage was done as we were trying to figure this thing out, or what let, other people had different roles within, and some damage was done. And, when you factor in some of the other things that what you can remember or what you want to choose to forget, ultimately it comes with a high price to at least what I value and what I hold dear in my life.
Yeah. What do you value? What are some things you value? I know you're a father
and son. We have a small family tree. My dad's an only child. I'm an only child, and my son's an only child. The loyalty of a small number of friends versus the good time of quite a few, and the love of a remarkable woman. More importantly, making sure that she goes to bed every night knowing.
Yeah, that's gratitude right there. It's easy to love somebody when things are going well,
100%.
And when tyranny and malevolence smacks us in the face, let's say, number 1, are we ready? And then number 2, what happens to those people that we do hold dear to our heart? Because here's the thing about pro athletes too, man. On the field, it's like, from the outsider looking in, we're strong, we're competitive, we're alpha. I don't really like that word necessarily, but type A, right, perhaps. But inside our own homes, we're also equally sensitive, right? Because you can't have one without the other. And so on the field, we're courageous. But then inside our own home, because we're in the news, we're even in the minor leagues, we're public figures in a way such as, like, we're the big league team in that tiny town.
Correct.
So people know who you are and everything else. We were in the paper and, and all this stuff. So that can get a hold of somebody, and then, so what I mean by having some fragility to us is we're supposed to be the strong person, but on the inside, we can fracture easily. We gain awareness. And so I'm curious to know, like, did you, through your trials and tribulations, did you over time, organically kind of narrow down who it is that is loyal to you, that is going to never leave you?
Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that, I had a very good judge as far as a few gentlemen. I also, over the course of time, whether it's friendship, relationship, or otherwise, have that with one or two female friends. But when it came down to it, whenever it was time to reach out, pride entered into the equation where, like, these are my closest dudes or my closest friends. I don't want them to know where I'm struggling, or, it's like I almost wanted to bring others in or utilize others because I knew you weren't going to be around late. That way the guys that are close, they won't ever know this about me or what I'm battling or what my demons are. And one thing I've learned, that whenever you finally swallow that jagged pill, you learn that there's some that their definition of love or friendship is different than yours, which you can't fault or even face it. If you put them in that difficult position, that the timing of your bad news or fires certainly shouldn't enter into the equation of them wanting to be a better person or in a better life. But also, it's tough not to, to get over that abandonment deal. But yet also, like you said, hey, these are the guys, or these are the people that really battled. Or especially, okay, now that, you have a diagnosis or an illness, or, you're going through programs to overcome whatever vices you have, at the end of the day, these are the people you want around, that from a success story standpoint. I'm a firm believer that it just makes the story down the road better, where the grit that you achieved or the dirt that you had to swallow, at the distance you had to fall, that all that matters. And whenever everything is shiny, you can have the humbleness to be able to say, not only ask for forgiveness, be strong in your faith, but also the people that rode through that fire, they're tried and tested, just like in medieval battle as well. And when it comes to the love of a woman, there's a reason you fell in love in the first place, and there's a reason that you'll fall in love again. And that's, to know what you've been through in the past is very, very important that everyone knows about that. Whereas before I was kind of under the belief that it wasn't necessary, because I certainly didn't want to lose anybody or hurt those that I had surrounded myself with.
Yeah. And in our personal life, I've learned it's quality over quantity. And then on the flip side of that, in the business world, I believe it's quantity that breeds quality, because in the business world, right, we have to iterate. You have to just iterate and iterate and iterate. That's quantity until you get to something of value.
Yeah. And it always, best way I can say is it always there's a reason that you retain the lesson. There's certain lessons that you've got to go through a lot of times. And then, man, whether it's lessons that you learn when you're in your teenagers, or whether it's lessons you learn as your 40s, or more importantly, anywhere in between, whenever you learn it. And there's a reason you maintain it and retain it, and then want to pass it along, so you don't want others to deal with it.
Right. Yeah. You mentioned faith earlier, and I was somebody who, I went to an all boys private Catholic high school, and I was spoon fed this religion, Catholicism, and I don't know if I really accepted it at any one point in time. And now I'm on the other side of a serious alcohol addiction, and I lean into the Bible, not so much as a religion per se, but I enjoy the stories, right? It gives me the ability to stay, I think, a little bit more true to myself, and it gives me an upward aim. How's faith played a role in your life in general, like historically, and then today where you are now facing Parkinson's?
Whenever I've been, my left arm is shook, or my hands shook, from time to time. God, since baseball, I remember pitching and it would shake, and you just kind of write it off as that's just part of pitching, and it would dissipate or it'd be intermittent. And then it sometimes come in at the most inopportune times, especially if you're around a woman. But over time, it was such a gradual increase that I didn't pay any attention. It was like, oh, it's just from 4 shoulder surgeries, But whenever the memory thing kind of started coming to play, and okay, now I'm getting leaned on by those that love and care about me are saying, get into the doc. And, you know, when you already kind of anticipate the bad news is coming, you don't want to deal with it because of X, Y, or Z that you're already dealing with. But what I'll share with you is that from a faith standpoint, when I got that diagnosis, it was first, I knocked this out on my own. I deal with it, figure out the medicine, and, you know, prolong the inevitable as long as we can. I mean, I know that I associate this disease with, you know, the outspoken ones that are showing, you know, they're doing the kind of the same thing that we're going to be doing now, as far as getting out there and trying to bring awareness, but also this is how we handle these things, you know, how I can make your life better, you can make mine better. But I had to deal with I didn't want people to know. I still don't, truth be told. A little bit of shaking here or there. It really bothers me at times, you know, try to hide it or, you know, just make sure that you don't see the left side or whatnot. And sometimes it's kind of, you're incapable of it. And then when you try to hide it, then it just makes things worse. So the faith has brought me what I guess probably in the grand scheme of things, it's brought me closer to where I should have been in the first place. That the outlook that I've had, rather than that, you know, fearful, I'm in my back's against the corner and I'm coming out swinging, and now it's kind of survival. Whereas that hurts people that are around you. Instead of give people a reason to get around you. It doesn't make any difference if you shake, you can't remember, you know. I mean, I'm not at the age where I need to worry about Alzheimer's and dementia, but that still doesn't mean that I had that moment of I've lost my train of thought. I mean, it's one thing to lose your car keys in the morning. It's another thing to be going in and out of the house 3 or 4 times because you can't remember if you got a pen or if you got your car keys, you got your wallet, or you even got your glasses on you. But it's also another thing whenever you start forgetting things. When your word really can't be trusted for good reason, it brings to light a few other things that you want to get that where your word can be trusted again, even if you just slow that down, even if you do shake in front of somebody. You know, like we talked about it a day or so ago, no matter rock bottom or basement, however you want to phrase it, you know, it's the same level for everybody. But the distance one has to fall in order to get there has to enter into the equation. And when you start realizing the toll that came, it's one thing for your own personal burden. You know, there's a lot of people with a lot more brains that can help you out with that. There's counselors, there's doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists, etc. But they don't live with you daily. They don't have daily experience with you. They don't work with you. In this small, tight-knit community that is at the top of epsilon that, you know, only a very, very few get to touch in our life, you find that, well, do you want to be that big fish in a small pond, or do you want to be the small fish in a great big ocean, or do you want to be a big fish in a big ocean? But ultimately, the pride of recognizing that vulnerability has to be out there. And when you come from a warrior-like mentality, whether albeit militarily or albeit athletically, or service-oriented individuals and cops or firemen, that's a very type A, like you said. It's a very astute mind. And, you know, Peterson says it best. You got a good man is not a good man. It's weak. It's a very violent, capable of violence man who has it voluntarily under control.
Yeah.
I said the cost comes very high.
Yeah, you're speaking about Jordan Peterson, right?
Jordan, yeah. Dr.
Yeah.
Peterson, yeah, he's a wizard when it comes to stuff. And yeah, like you said, Stoicism, Peterson, got Jocko. I mean, got all the personal development. You got to first want to be better first before you even start diving into those attributes, you know. You got to want it.
Yeah, you got to want it is key. And I think, you know, Jordan Peterson, we had mentioned this before. If those watching and reading aren't familiar with him, we highly encourage you to go seek him out, because he's a psychologist, world renowned, but by definition, but he's more of a philosopher, really. And
he really is.
You know, he speaks to men incredibly well. And to your point, our sword should be sharp on both sides, and we should be ready to use it at any point in time. But we should also not need to pull it out only when absolutely necessary, right? The aim is to be a good man, not a nice man. And and in order to be good, we need to understand ourselves, which includes vulnerability. And that's Brene Brown. Brene Brown says, without vulnerability, there is no such thing as courage. And I think us men, especially in the sports and the performance world, we're not in tune with that because we view it as weakness. And I was certainly one of those folks. Were you?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I don't like, whenever you grow up, don't want your vulnerabilities known. I mean, especially as you move up there's a reason you survive in the arena. There's no other way to say it. It's one thing to be in the arena, like, the Man in the Arena speech that Teddy Roosevelt gave says. It's another thing to win it. And you have to repeatedly win. And there's times that there's only so few that get up there. But then whenever that time is over, there's a lot of demons that come up. And then all of a sudden, when like Peterson talks about in Simple Psychology, you got to go back to where that fork in the road happened to then make sense of the demons. And then on top of that, how are we combating them? And it starts with you wanting to get better or you recognizing this. I mean, it's going to be very lonely if you're into this, like, the hell with them and move on. You are not going to achieve equilibrium is some degree that I've learned, or in the degrees that I've learned. The best way that I can put it is that no matter what medical diagnosis or what demons you deal with, those that are around you pay the cost. You yourself have to deal with what's behind the sternum or between your own ears. Man, you're not going to get through it unless you have good people around you. And you're also not going to have good people around you if you don't give them a reason to do that.
Yeah, because they're going to go bye-bye. How did you, the whole equilibrium piece, right? Yeah. And people say the balance of life, and anybody who wants to achieve anything great in their life is going to be out of balance in some capacity, right? How do you, now that you've been over 2 decades in the game in some capacity, how do you speak to somebody who's going through a challenging time, whether it be a diagnosis or somebody, in my case, addiction? How do you go about it for yourself to find the equilibrium and the balance?
I can tell you that first and foremost, the part that doesn't work is you doing it on your own, or thinking that you got to battle through this. I'm going to keep it to myself. I mean, even if you get around your friends, I mean, let's face it, men are going to talk about certain things, but only to an extent. So first and foremost, that you're just, if you think you can, you're just prolonging the start of where we're all ultimately hoping to get. Second, those you trust to reveal that vulnerability, give them, the ones you trust, you throw a bobber out in the pond. Can I trust them with this? Do they use it against me? Can I talk to them about this? This is because what we believe, or men like us, or females for that matter, believe that we are revealing something that is now showing a chink in the armor or a vulnerability that can be used against us and be very detrimental, not necessarily physically, but mentally, and how you approach life, as well as how you attack this. So hopefully you have people around you that you can talk to like that. The second and most important step after that is the people with a lot more brains, psychologists, the doctors. If there's something medically that needs to be addressed, you still have that support capacity around you. At the end of the day, it's only when you get to that point that you start to realize these self-sabotaging things that you're doing to yourself, or that others are doing to you, that you think is love, but really you got to look at a bigger picture, to which then lead to, how do you handle this stuff when you're by yourself? First, it's who you hold yourself accountable to. whenever no one's around. And that's, for me and my faith, that's the man upstairs. Also, lessons that society that I belong to has taught through ritual work, memorization, etc. Both in the shadow or in it or outside of. The other thing is that those who are loyal and have demonstrated that, you start to realize what are the characteristics of those people that I want to not only reveal this type of thing to, but also not necessarily what they can bring to you, but there's a hell of a lot of weight that goes into just simply being there. Whether it's a sounding board, whether it's venting to, or just for that matter, realizing there's others that have been through this, that have chewed this same dirt. It may not be in the same capacity, but it's under the same umbrella as a demon or mental illness or God, whatever else is going, attacking you, But at the end of the day, it's who you hold yourself accountable to upstairs, which will then lead to walks. That'll lead to writing in a journal that we've all learned about. It's addressing what made me upset and mad, how foolish was or wasn't it? And then on top of that, who did it impact besides yourself? That's kind of that's where I'm at. That or you turn on a ball game of sport that you love.
And that's all being aware and gaining awareness, right? And another piece is like, you can tell a good friend by telling them good news. How many times do we tell somebody good news and they immediately turn it on themselves and they one-up us?
Well, I got a great one-up story. I'll never forget how it's just in conversation and just happy about, a stepping stone in my professional career, being promoted, and somehow or another that was changed into vehicle being driven, and how his college football career was different than my professional baseball career. It's like, I don't know how that applies, but okay, whatever, dude.
Right. But what you learned out of that is, can you tell that individual anything from your heart on what you're dealing with right now? Right? Never.
I won't even get started, much less. He's not going to know anything. It's like, if that's the game we're going to play, I'm going to win. So I'm not going to give you any ammunition to utilize. It's at the end of the day, I know I'm confident in who I am and what I represent, regardless of the accolades. And then as those chinks in the armor start to happen, our mindset changes because we recognize it and are dealing with it. But I'll be damned if we're going to let somebody else know about it and utilize it against us, or will one up us. It's like at the end of the day, when you're arguing with somebody, what do we win today? As opposed to, are we moving a relationship forward, a friendship forward? I mean, at the end of the day, is it more important to win or okay, you won this round, or how are we going to utilize this to move us forward, if you even want to move forward?
Right, because like Jocko says, I think it's him, where he uses that word tactical really well, which is temporary, finite, short term. But if you play that long-term game, especially in your relationships, right, to your point, like you're leaning in, what you're going through right now, you're leaning in into people who can be there for you. I mean, how did you find, if somebody's going through something tyrannical and they're in the tornado with it, where do you start? Like, where did you start gaining clarity and getting clear on your purpose and mission as a father, as a professional individual, and then reestablish hope for yourself moving forward?
I would say probably this last summer, when it became clear this is what I'm dealing with. You took stock and like, here it is, just you write it out. Then you realize this is what it's cost. This is who it's impacted. How important are those people? Can we make it right? Do they even want to make it right? My defining moment was when I started to evaluate what is the cause of the overall mental aptitude that I possess, as well as what is prohibiting it. Because ultimately, it doesn't do any good to know what you have to do. You got to take that first step. And when you start to realize what you're starting to lose, it makes not only who's still around more important, but also you evaluate that cost and know that can't happen to anymore or to yourself. And It's whenever you're able to do exactly what we did when we went out to the mound, and that was tune it all out. At the end of the day, you got to go back to work. There'll be a time when it worries about itself. That's what the good book says. Tomorrow will worry about itself. It's also, you remember in Romans verse that you don't repay evil for evil. Some of the things that I'm having to deal with that, have resurfaced in a previous life in a shadow, for example, that just, well, all the good that comes with it, there's a lot of bad sometimes. And dealing with that, which, it's one thing to shoulder it, it's another thing to deal with it. It's another thing to be able to control what brings that out. Whenever you can't control that, that's an epiphany. Because when you want to reach out for certain people and those people aren't there because of what we've already talked about, you only find that out whenever the noise quiets.
And that can be dangerous, when we're left to our...
That's where the vices come into. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like you quieted your demons a certain way. And there is a way that's healthy that doesn't involve what vices. And that's what the people with a lot more brains and DR in front of their name help out with.
Yeah. Although we need to be careful too with just spending 10 minutes in a doctor's office and having them prescribe an antidepressant.
God, you find out the hard way every time.
Yeah. I mean, an antidepressant, an SSRI, or an uptake med, or whatever it is that doc prescribes, that is not necessarily the answer, depending on what you're going through. I'm not anti-medication per se, right. But it's you can get to the root of it. What's causing the drop in dopamine and serotonin, which contribute to those positive feedback loops that keep us moving forward.
Right. I mean, you start hearing terms that you've never heard before, like serotonin and, all sorts of different chemicals in your brain that, this front lobe or this lobe or that, or, ultimately that's learning that type of things, or as far as we're at in the brain is what drove me. That's kind of like that. Oh crap, I might be dealing with something that's a little bit bigger and a little bit more severe than, a little memory loss, or, okay, so I did, I went back after concussion differently. Like when you start to figure that out, you start hearing things and you want to know more about it, because for whatever number of reasons that apply to you, it's like a light bulb moment that we're no longer the player now. The teacher's being teach. That didn't make sense, but you get what I mean. The teacher's being taught.
Right. Yeah. What are your, put us in the day of the life of Clifton here for a moment, in terms of like when you wake up in the morning, do you have a reliable routine that you go through in the morning and or the evenings that help you move forward, right? So I'm thinking about the guy. Here's who I'm thinking of. I'm thinking about the guy who hasn't gotten help yet, who's sitting in his basement, listening to the footsteps over top of him, his family, his kids, and he's got a bottle of vodka or some drink of choice, and he's watching this and saying, I know I've got a problem, but this alcohol or this cocaine, or maybe I'm just so damn depressed I can't even get out of bed and put my socks on, Yeah. Like, what do you say to him where you're fighting a different type of battle here, but yet you still have hope. You're still positive. Mm-hmm. You're fighting the good fight. Like, what do you say to that person, how to start their day? Or maybe it's something else, whatever comes to mind. Like, what is it for you in the morning that somebody else can maybe grab hold of and say, okay, I can take this little step today?
Let's establish what you just described. Both of us have been there. You know that something's the matter. You know what you ought to be doing. What's prohibiting? We both have talked about it. It's one thing to know what you should do. It's another thing to put a list together and, here's my to-do list, but you got to do it. So what's prohibiting you to take that first step? And like you said, it's that routine. It's kind of interesting you bring up, routine, because I think we've all heard the General McCraven spiel about making your bed first thing, just like in SEAL training. I remember being a coach and implementing. And I can tell you that when things are starting to fall off the rails, start there. There's a lot of psychology that comes behind just getting that first task done. I'll tell you that once you get past that first task, becoming routine is a little bit easier. Whether that's you get up, you handle the pet, whether you make a cup of coffee, whether it's to get ready to go work out, whether it's to go take a walk, or it's to pound a glass of water so it kind of jump starts that metabolism. It is vital to get to that point, to have that first step of the day after that routine. And that is day in and day out. It needs to be the exact same, right up until the point you either brush your teeth or you get dressed or whatnot. And now it's time to approach the day. I think we've all played for a coach that said something along the lines that we get more done before breakfast than they do in the entire day or before lunch.
Yeah, winning the day. And that's Stoic philosophy. It's winning the day, which starts with winning the morning. And you can't win the morning unless you win the evening. Because if we go to bed at midnight, the chances of us getting up at 6 a.m. or 5:30 or whatever to read a chapter in a book, do a little gratitude journal, get that drink of water, get that coffee, say a quick little prayer, and get up and get moving. Mm-hmm. If we go to bed at 10, we're more inclined to get up early, right? And what happens with that, interestingly, what I've learned is what happens with that closing the, or making our bed type of mentality, we're closing the loop. It's a positive feedback loop, right? Because once we start a task, but we need to complete it, because if we start it, stop it at 50% and say, I'll get to it later, our brain leaves that open and it rests on our shoulder and kind of gnaws at us. So we get anxious, we have anxiety, we have frustration, we get that burn in our chest, and then we revert back to what's easy and what's familiar, which for me was the bottle. For somebody else, it's something else. But so what I heard out of that was start small.
You got to have some level of victory. I mean, let's face it, we didn't reach the professional level. No matter, I think you got drafted out of high school like early on, and me doing the JUCO and going through the Division I level, like you got some life experience, but we didn't get there unless you had that passion to continue to build on these little smaller victories. Whether it was controlling a running game, or how quick to the plate, or hitting the inevitable 90 miles an hour, whatever time, or 95. I mean, I've never hit triple digits, but I remember getting up over that 90 mark a few times, quite a few. But at the end of the day, if you can't do the little things right, you're never going to do the big things right. And I tell you, when you start losing the big things, or those that are the big things, by God, there's not a bigger wake-up call. Or, I hate to say it this way, it goes back to business. How do you eat an elephant? Well, one bite at a time.
Yeah, and if you're not ready, if you don't make the decision for yourself, it'll be made for you.
No question about it. Or you'll get walked on by somebody who does have a little bit more of a clue. Absolutely. That, or you lose sight of really what the clue is.
Yeah. And in my view, it's like society's broken because the message is to be nice. The message is you're just enough. The message is you're perfect just the way you are. And it's like, no, we're humans. We were built. Look at the accomplishments of humans throughout time. And now we've got AI that's messing everything up, for the good and the bad. I don't think anybody really knows what is going to happen with AI just yet. But back to your point, it starts with the small things. And so that leads me to this right here. So you have a good morning routine. You're facing challenges day in and day out. When you're midday and some internal dialogue of, let's just call it negativity, comes your way, what do you anchor yourself inside of? Is it looking up into the sky and breathing? Is it journaling? How do you help yourself when in those moments?
Yeah, we all get it. First, it's, the power of your heart rate, whether it's, you got to take a deep breath, or you got to hold it, but you have to get it down. You can't allow it to continue to escalate. We were taught on the mound not to show emotion. I remember also one of the things that, helped me to become as good of an official as I can be is the importance of, you are the arbiter of the game, and therefore this is the courtroom and you're the judge. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all at point where, the decision lies, with me and me alone. But at the end of the day, how you navigate past that first moment of, this is where I'm at. We got to cross. Now I'm going to say it's a crossroads, but like a little level of self-assessment where you have that moment of, okay, I recognize I'm off the track where I would like to be, or where I need to be, or where I ought to be. Also, how do we get back on? Whether it's that deep breath, whether it's that walk, whether it's a moment of self-reflection, whether it's that moment of allowing a temporary emotion to yield a permanent consequence.
Oh, well said.
And until you can actually slow your life down, that's how whether you want to call it like allow the life to come to us, or whether you allow the game to come to me, or, whatever phrase you wish to use that we're familiar with in athletics or even business. At the end of the day, your life is going to impact others. And the gratitude that people are drawn to is that where you're not angry and you're not a victim, and that you've got a definite chief aim, and that you are doing steps to get to that point. Because ultimately, if you're not, the sum of the people that you have around you are not only are the characteristics that you hold personal and vital to your own self-existence, that's going to be reflective in that sum of average people that are around you. And trust me, whenever you have that moment of looking around you and going, who's still here and what type of qualities do they possess? Is this truly who I am? Because let's face it, that's how the others are looking at you. That's that defining moment for me. Like, who is this also impacting? But more importantly, it's, do I care how it's impacting them? Well, there's always some level of care, but then there's also another way of looking at it. And that is, do they see that V in the eyebrows because it's anger, or is that V in the eyebrows because I'm slowing it down to be cognitively aware of what's going on, to where I can give them their expected due diligence, where, one, I'd expect it, or have a level of respect that I'm giving them, but they also give me. At the end of the day, people want to be happy. But also, as well as I do, that vulnerabilities that we were talking about, what leads us to that point, ultimately leads us to, do we go down the vice road, or do we take that self-reflection to make better and more informed choices, regardless of the cause?
So I think that we may be able to nestle that inside of gaining self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like I was certainly somebody who was unaware of how I was treating others and the choices that I was making, and therefore how I was treating myself. So I suppose, where are you? Are you going to continue spreading this message? Because you're really good at this, man. And you've been through a lot, from being a professional athlete and then calling the game the arbiter in a way. And now you're the arbiter of your own life, which we all are or should be, right. Anyway, but now in a different type of definition. What's coming up next for you?
Oh, man. I've got a couple of different ideas. One, I'm really passionate about the time that I won't say wasted, but more importantly, that when I was stubborn, didn't get into the doc. I don't know if it would have affected the, level of, level of memory loss or symptoms from being concussed or lack of healing. But more importantly, what's next is getting that word out in the environments that I surround myself with, is within the game. So that way they understand that, no, we all hold the same exact thing dear to our heart. How we love one another, those that are close to us, and how they love us. You got to give them a reason to understand some of the attribute, some of the behavior changes that come about, that affect them, that really, you're not just an asshole, but rather, there's something that's in our line of work medically could be involved, or the fact that you're not doing anything about it. It's one thing to get a jab, it's another thing to get the gut punch, when it came to these doctor's appointments for me. But man, when I heard on one, weekend officiating to learn somebody talked to me about what he was experiencing that he'd had no idea that I was. There's no way. I hadn't worked with him for a couple of years. And then I learned, he started talking about what his wife was dealing with. And oh my God, someone I loved and cared about, that this is, and it's got to be progressively getting worse. And then to learn, even think back to a previous marriage or my son, it was, that type of thing needs to be told in an environment to where you may not have a group therapy session or counseling session, but it makes it more real to those who, if it has been going on, you don't have to chew the same dirt that I did. Allow my struggle of frustration and a lot of losses to not only improve your own life, but also to know that you're not alone. Others have gone through this. Because I can tell you there's a lot of things that when learning about bad calls, choices, decisions, it's always, don't ridicule the decision if you didn't know what the choices I had were. But at the end of the day, you can certainly improve your choices whenever you realize that there is a brotherhood at the top of the pyramid that has dealt with what we have. It may not be the same exact thing or the same topic, but you need to know that there's an umbrella out there, whether you want to call it mental illness or whether you just want to call it handling your demons. Because ultimately, we all want to have a legacy left. Are we leaving the world in a better place? And is somebody a better person because they knew you? Is our career athletically, does it impact someone for the better, not just myself? Yes, we got a lot of good stories. And, while we won't ever be in Cooperstown, at the end of the day, we can throw out all sorts of statistics, but let's face it, there's only a small percentage of people that get to perform, no matter what their field of endeavor is, at the level that we had. No matter if it was a few years ago, a couple of years ago, 20 years ago, because it's that same type of struggle that's going to apply in business and apply in friendship and relationships. God, if we had parenting figured out, my God, we'd have an instruction manual, but not every instruction manual was correct in that. You haven't had a teenager yet. Brother, strap in, you never want to get a phone call from a crying mother that your son has had an awful travesty occur when you're like, damn, that only happens in the movies, and you never think that you're going to be sitting in that medical chair or hearing a report that maybe you were mentally ready for, but you never are mentally really ready for it, So what's next is getting that word out. Second is, continuing the path from a faith standpoint, knowing that no matter who's come and gone, that the good Lord's always in control, and that he's never going to put you in a position to where you're going to purposely hurt someone. You have to make that choice. And the sooner you figure that out, the sooner you figure out of the type of people you want around.
Yeah, that's really well said.
The other thing is that, kind of like what you and I have talked about, what's next? Making sure that the goals that I have, that I had lost sight of, never get lost sight of again, and those who I surround myself with never give me a reason to not want to push them to theirs, but also more importantly, that I want to push them towards theirs. I want to be able to help them, and more importantly, provide an environment that gives them the full range of emotion to feel comfortable voicing. Whereas before, no matter if it was an illness or not, I made that very difficult. I did.
Yeah, it's interesting that when we ask ourselves rhetorically, like, why do people change? When do people change? Why don't we take action voluntary action before it's too late? And then we hope, especially for us men, it's like we're so self-destructive, and it's, our inner dialogue can be so wicked. People change fundamentally when the pain of our current situation is worse than the pain that it's going to take to overcome and heal. Or more optimistically, is when we set upon ourselves like an upwards aim, a long-term vision, where all we do is think about it when we eat and sleep and daydream. I mean, it just consumes us like it did as a kid becoming a professional athlete, right? Because everybody around, everybody around us says, you know, you're unrealistic and, you know, whatever it is that they say to us, but you have to be unrealistic to achieve great things. So it's that awareness piece. I mean, and I hope that we don't wait too long before it's too late, you know, at our own demise, let's say. How did that prompt you to take action? Mm-hmm. I think this is crucially important, because anybody who's sitting on that couch, who's sitting in the dark, in the basement per se, who knows they need to take action, but hasn't taken action yet. You started taking action after this.
Yeah. Once I got that diagnosis, I had that gut punch of not only was I thought what I was prepared for was there, but also it was worse. And it was during a difficult time to where I was, had a few things going on personally where, the price and cost of what I was dealing with that led to this diagnosis that ultimately got me into the damn doctor in the first place, ultimately came at a very personal loss on, you know, regardless of the health. And when you learn that you realize that you're not going to be able to, who you thought was going to be in your corner, or you find out their level of commitment because, I mean, you put them there. At some point you look up and you're like, there's nobody, if not you, then who? It doesn't matter if you reach up for help. It's the matter of, you got it. This is the beginning of the end, or is it? And when you know, have that epiphany to realize we come through a very, like I said, individualized team sport. And when you realize that I can perform, that my best could, you know, ultimately carry someone else who isn't having a very good day, that ultimately the team wins. And when you learn that the team is changing, or you're like what you thought was and it wasn't, at the end of the day, you have to come to grips not only with that, but also how are you going to overcome it? Because at the end of the day, nobody else is going to do it for you. And how long do you need to lay in this big pile of, I believe Patton said horse dung. He said something else, but you know, how long are you going to stay there until you figure out that the smell is not going to improve until you get rid of it, for one, and then two, come to grips with cleaning up, and three, getting up and doing something all about it. You know, I mean, ultimately you have to do it, and it doesn't matter how you got there, but part of how you get through it is understanding how the hell you got there and the price associated. Because ultimately you're just going to be a damn victim. Or pointing the finger, or coming up with lies and exaggerate those, you know, just to further a narrative. You don't want to do that. I mean, ultimately that's just about attention. You yourself are not getting better, not to mention the environment you're trying to create is not going to be any better. Is that really the type of people that you want around you? You know, ultimately, I lost sight of who I am, and we went off the track a long way before I figured it out. And I will be the first one to look you in the eye and anybody else that says I probably don't have it figured out quite yet. But I haven't figured that part out, at least coming to grips with it, had I not taken a few steps forward. You know, I mean, ultimately, I know what I would want people to say about me whenever my time to be called home happens. And right now, those that I have around me, I don't think can say that unequivocally. I'll get there. I'll get there again. And as long as anybody listening to this believes that, I can promise you the guys who have already chewed that dirt, whether they're going through their own battle or not, they're going to be there to push it. just like in baseball, just like in business. I mean, you want people around you that's going to push your success, not bring you back or, not treat you like the new shiny penny, but rather, when it's tough, they want to go through that. And you give them a reason to go through that because they know on the other flip side of that, you're going to do the same for them. But also it makes everything that has ever been revealed that you either didn't want to address, learn that you had to address, but ultimately whatever was causing you to make some of these bad choices and decisions, can those decisions be improved upon, but also giving the environment for people who want to be around you. So that way you can give them a reason to speak highly of you as part of your legacy. I hope that's kind of clear. I mean, I have a tendency to go around and around.
No, I'm with you. I think that's phenomenal. Yeah. And thank you for sharing your story. And now you're on a mission, brother. Now you're on a
I hope it
mission.
touches somebody, the ultimate, story that, like you said, you're getting into the good book. I'm getting into the good book. Ultimately, what's driving this is no matter how we got here, we're here. And we're certainly not going to be the last. So how can we make it a little bit better for somebody else to then hopefully make the world a little bit better?
Agreed. Well said. So we will continue this mission. I'm glad that we had this conversation. I hope anybody watching and listening, you got a few things out of this. And we are here for you. We
Absolutely.
are here for you as a community, as a brotherhood. And, like they say in the rehab community, it's build your side of the bridge and clean your side of the street. Take action one step at a time. And you're doing this, and I'm glad you're doing well, brother.
So am I. I'm happy that that we connected in this manner, because I can tell you what, there is a comfort to know that no matter what level we reach, the demons are all the same. There's a hell of a lot of them. And to realize that in this small community, there are cats that once you get over that pride of either reaching out, whether it's the pride of not wanting to confide vulnerability and someone you may think trusts or doesn't trust, or maybe doesn't or does, at the end of the day, you didn't get to pro ball by yourself. No matter how often you want to say it, you didn't get to the level in business you did by yourself. And the sooner you realize that, the sooner it makes keeping those around you and giving them an environment to want to help you because you helped them. Well, ultimately, we make our brotherhood a little bit different, a little bit better by doing things like this. And the sooner you realize that, and sooner we forget, these guys figure this out. Not too many people are more stubborn than us. It's there. How quickly do you want to get on the other side of that bridge, like we've talked about?
Right. Humanizing the struggle, because
100%.
we all struggle. And that's part of life. In some ways, that's the beauty of life.
We can't all be David Goggins, because if we all try to be David Goggins, who's going to be like us?
There you go.
You'll put your version up there on it,
There it is. Yeah. It's been great having
I wish
you.
I was in as good a shape as Goggins.
Right. Yeah. He's a maniac, man. In a good way. I mean,
right.
Yeah.
Right. He makes his bed in the morning, I'm sure of.
Oh, man. You can bet
Actually, he probably doesn't, since he wakes up before his wife.
Yeah. There. Right.
Right.
All right. It's been great having you on. And
thanks, Eric.
I'm glad that we're building this brotherhood and this relationship, and we're going to be in touch from here on out. We've had some great conversations before we jumped on here and pressed play. And, we're going to continue to do our part and help as many as we can, because we're human. And throughout the process, the more we share, hopefully, if we help one person, we're doing our job just fine in a way.
100%.
All right. Until next time. Thank you.
See you, man.
All right. See you, brother.